Hi, this is Dave from TV Games, and I'm here today to talk to you about my little adventure going to the National Videogame Museum down in Frisco, Texas this past April. Now, a little backstory. My girlfriend and I were looking to take a road trip around this time. It might, back in April, late March, early April, because it was my birthday at the time. Yes, I turned 40. We decided she has a friend down in Dallas, Texas we could stay with, who, by the way, thank you for letting us stay with you. And the museum was opening up on April 2nd, so we figured, you know what? Let's make an adventure out of it. So we live in Queens, more or less, Queens, New York, and the trip from Queens, New York to Dallas, Texas, where we were staying, it's a good solid 24 hours. And I'm not just saying 24 hours, I mean 24 at least, because you have to also keep in mind, microphone. You got to stop for bathroom breaks, dinner, stretching your legs, gas. So, a long drive. We stopped 12 hours in and stayed overnight in Knoxville, Tennessee, and then finished up the trip the next day. The one thing about the road trip, though, is that we kind of became connoisseurs of the fine meals you could get at Cracker Barrel. This is not a paid sponsorship video, by the way. This is actually just me showing off my Cracker Barrel map of fun for your road trip. We got to Frisco, Texas on Saturday morning. Well, we got to Dallas, Texas first. Stayed overnight at her friend's house, and then the next morning we got some breakfast tacos, which are quite delish, and we got to the museum. As predicted, the line was quite out the door. It wasn't too bad though, because it was moving efficiently. It was, it kept moving, and there was entertainment. There was some cosplayers that were interesting. They were doing their job quite well. Sports mascot, and I'm sorry, I don't know the name of this mascot, and some musicians playing some nice little classical renditions of songs, and it was great. But once we got closer to the beginning of the line, the end of the line by the doors, I was able to grab one of these little brochures here, which I thought was very cleverly done. If you, for the uninitiated, this is a reference to The Legend of Zelda, the first one. It has a bunch of factoids here, too, like Grand Theft Auto 5 generated $1 billion in sales within 3 days of its release. Pretty interesting. And as they also go on to mention, there are 2 museums in the United States that are dedicated to carrots, yet there isn't even one dedicated to the history of video games until now. So a little background about this museum, I should say. It's founded by Joe Santulli of Digital Press, the publication and the store in Clifton, New Jersey. John Hardy and Sean Kelly. They used to have a traveling museum of sorts that they used to, tour with, and to show off, bits and pieces of their most interesting items of their respective collections, which, it's quite extensive from what I've heard. I mean, these guys have been collecting for decades, not years, decades. And they all just decided one day, you know what, this needs a permanent home. So, after a lot of planning, funding, getting all the bits and pieces of paperwork and whatever, they settled on the Discovery Center in Frisco, Texas. Walking in, the first thing you're greeted with is a large sculpture called Pixels by Jeremy Zwitt. It's 15 feet tall, I should say. It's pretty interesting. Walking into the museum, once you pay, and the fee is the entry fee is quite inexpensive, you're given 4 tokens, which I could assume you're gonna know what they're for. Let me see if I can get this on camera here. They're quite well minted, but the NVM is on the front there. If you can see that, yeah, okay. And the backside has their mascot, Blip. And there you go. See, you see that? You have a nicely hand-painted mural of like box art and game characters all just seamlessly blending into each other. That was done by local artist Anna Terry, local Texas artist, and that was really well done. She was there for opening day too, and I saw her and her son having a great time playing with all the little exhibits. The first thing you see is the Pong exhibit. There's a copy of Puppy Pong, which is rare, but if you were going to a really cool doctor in the 70s or a pediatrician, he would have had one if he really cared. The biggest thing, though, literally, was that the world's largest game of Pong. It's a working Pong console hooked up to a humongous television set that you could play against your friend. And I mean, when you're grabbing it, it's not this, it's this. I didn't get a chance to play it because the line was long for that, but it was a trip to watch just in action. I mean, there's just tons of exhibits. Just talking about them won't give it much, won't do it justice. But I mean, I enjoyed the game boxes of the third-party companies, kind of seeing them all in one place. There was a display of patches, the Activision patches that everyone always wanted, but only few got, because you really had to do well in the games back in the day to get a patch. Then you had to take a picture and then mail it. It's harder than it seems. There was an exhibit on old handheld games, like the old ones, like the vacuum fluorescent display ones and the LCD ones. There were many of them that were playable too. And that's the one thing about the museum. 90% of it, I would say, is interactive. You can play with a lot of stuff there. They have games hooked up. They have things you can play with. I mean, you can't just grab the Nintendo World Championship cartridge and lick it or anything like that, but for the most part, there's a lot of interactivity. There was a very interesting Easter egg hunt, which I couldn't really do because that's something you have to do when you have time and you're alone, but a second playthrough. But there's a cabinet which kind of gives you a little history of Easter eggs, that little area, and then you have to go on a little Easter egg hunt around the museum. There was a display of pretty much every console that you could imagine, complete with kiosks, interactive kiosks that were controlled by oversized SNES pads, Natch, that gave you little bits of trivia about them. What else? The line of computers. I like the home computers because I've never seen a Coleco Atom in working order, because it's one of those things that you just never come across, and when you do, it's either broken or it just takes up too much real estate, or someone wants too much money for it. So, as a ColecoVision fan, I was glad to get to see that finally. Two of my favorite exhibits, or actually just one, were the recreations of the 1970s living room and the 1980s bedroom. The 70s living room was covered in fake wood paneling, plush carpet, a really dingy couch, a tacky coffee table, and a console television, complete with Intellivision hooked up to it. But this was all fully playable again. You could sit down and play a game of Intellivision with your friend if no one else was playing. On the other side was an 80s bedroom with various bits of 80s toys and games and stickers and posters, and a working Nintendo Entertainment System as well, which you could relive the life of a 1980s kid who had the coolest room ever. And a copy of Duran Duran's Arena board game, which was pretty interesting. I mean, there's just so much to see there. I mean, the most impressive thing also was, well, one of the most impressive things was the mosaic of Ralph Baer, made out of Rubik's Cubes. That was pretty trippy. Once you're done with the museum proper, you exit into the game room. Now, the game room is a replica of an 80s arcade. It's a little more cramped, but that's actually how I remember them. They had a copy of Turbo, which I used to love as a kid, the ColecoVision version, and playing the arcade version is just more fun, of course. And that's it. I mean, the museum, I'm definitely going to go back once I get back to Texas, because I love Texas too. Dallas is a great little city, and we had a great time there also. What I've come to understand is that the stuff that's on display there is only like maybe a small percentage of what they actually have, and there's still stuff rotating in and out, so they're going to be updating these exhibits constantly, and they might even get an expansion going on too. This is just the beginning of the museum, so check it out while check it out when you can, because it's definitely great now, and I'm going to, it was a great job, and it was a trip to go there, and I had a great time, so I'm really glad I got a chance to see that. Anyway, this was Dave for TV Games. Thank you for coming by, and I will see you next week. Oh, also, I mean, I didn't come home with many souvenirs, but I did manage to pick up an official mug from the gift shop.